Well, thank you for having me again. Um, yes, this is really one of the last phases of the acute energy war that Putin launched against Europe a year before his invasion of Ukraine. He had prepared this energy war against Europe. Europe was very dependent on his gas. 45% of the natural gas Europe was using was coming from Russia, and he used this to try to undermine the solidarity of the European Union to try and cause a crisis so they wouldn't support Ukraine in the war. And that has failed. So after he cut off the gas through Nord Stream and it was replaced with gas mainly from Norway and from the United States, but also from Algeria, Europe has enough gas. And they knew that this last gas that crosses Ukraine was going to be cut off. That's about 5% of the gas they use in a year. And that was going to be cut off. And they knew ahead of time, and that was priced in. And so none of this should be a problem for any country in Europe. They've had 3 years now. And the Ukrainians, you know, gave them 3 years. The countries in the east of Europe gave them 3 years to adapt to this. Now, Slovakia was all ready for this. So is Hungary. So is Austria. They're particularly dependent on this gas that was just recently ended. But Slovakia is complaining. They've had a change of government, and the new president, Mr. Fico, is very pro-Putin, obviously, and he's complaining loudly. But the reality is, Slovakia will have plenty of gas from other sources. Of course, they'll pay more for it. But everybody's been paying more for gas in Europe. All of Europe is paying about twice as much as before the war, twice as much since they've lost the Russian gas. Yes. Well, that depends on reading Mr. Trump's mind. So I'll tell you what I understand about this. Trump has this thing where he thinks there should not be a misalignment in the balance of payments with other countries. He threatens to put tariffs on everybody who has a negative balance of payments with the United States. However, if you look at what the European Union is doing, 67% of all the gas that's exported from the United States, this is a huge amount. So, largest exporter in the world of LNG, 67% of it is going to Europe. And it right now provides 47%. In 2023, it was almost 50%, and this year is about 40% of all the LNG that Europe imports. So it's actually pretty hard to export more. And I think the American companies, just like a buyer of gas wants a diversified set of suppliers, the American exporters of gas would like to have a diversified set of buyers. And so I don't think that number can go much higher. It's hard for me to see where Mr. Trump is going to go with this. This might be leverage for some other political concessions he wants, say, getting them to pay more for NATO and that kind of thing. Yeah. No, I have to say, although I will say that the acute energy war, Europe has won it. They didn't have to surrender to the blackmail of having the gas cut off by Russia and give up support for Ukraine. So, in that sense, they have enough gas and they won that energy war. But the energy crisis continues. In a sense, the energy war continues because, as you've said, the sources of gas they have now are more expensive. They're paying about twice as much for natural gas as they were before the war. Now, I have to say, a lot of this is a problem with European policies, with European energy policy, and with the European Green Deal in particular. I see it as an own goal. On the one hand, they want what I would say is an overdependence on renewable energy and overdependence on wind and solar. But then we get periods like I'm here in Berlin, in Germany, in November and early December. It was dark, and there was very little wind, and it's very cold. And they used up their extra surplus natural gas they had saved for the year. And now in January, it's going to be very cold again. So overly depending on renewables makes them more dependent on natural gas. It becomes more critical when there's no wind and when there's no sun. They should never have closed the nuclear plants in Germany. And this is the discussion the European Union has to sort out if they want to be competitive. They're going to have to do something more reasonable, in my opinion.
أنا أشكر لك هذه التوضيحات وأيضا تواجدك معنا الدكتور توماس أودونيل وأنت خبير في أسواق الطاقة والزميل العالمي في مركز ويلسون.
Thank you too. I appreciate you having me.
فاصل قصير مشاهدينا نتابع من بعده عالم الطاقة.